The third aspect of the budget had to deal with the issue of the current situation with the people. When you are in a process of change, then there is always the temptation to change at a rate that leaves a lot of people out of that change. We were very conscious to ensure that the people's interests as they exist today are maintained. And in that sense, we have not interfered with the size of the budget that has been devoted to what has been called the social programs. But we have indicated that many of these programs must now be refined and redirected to achieve a better objective. We have not interfered at all with any of these programs. In fact, in some cases, we have said they ought to be expanded. But we believe that in expansion, there must be a redirection of it. Some have said that there is no direction in the budget. I have noticed some comments from some of my political colleagues in Parliament, and I would like to invite them to read the budget, because obviously they would not have been accustomed to a budget with direction, and that since this one had direction, they could not figure it out. I also, in our trust, therefore, we did not only look at the issue of retaining the welfare of the people, we also looked at the issue of the development part. And the development part to sustain the growth that we are trying to trigger is based on a revitalized energy sector, is based on a renewed agricultural sector, so that our inflation problem could be tackled at its roots. And to deal with the issue of inflation and higher prices, we indicated in the budget that we will do it at both the level of affecting the aggregate demand, as economists like Dr. Job will say, and also affecting the supply. So we want to increase the concept of food production in this country, and I'm very happy that the Minister will be joining us and will perhaps be able to elaborate on that issue. We'll also, of course, increase the energy production in the country. And then we'll sustain that by the new impetus that we are given to what has sometimes been referred to as the onshore economy, that is, as opposed to the enclaved economy. What we have felt that the development part, particularly with respect to investment, was reinforcing an enclaved economy. And by that I mean an economy that is linked and dependent on the external world to a greater extent. So our country, instead of becoming more resilient over the 20 years of yesterday, have become less resilient. Instead of becoming less exposed to the international financial system and all that may happen, has become, in fact, more exposed. And therefore, the building of resilience can only come if development is owned by the people. And it is in that context we also introduced a program of public offerings of state enterprises. Not all state enterprises, because we do believe there is a strategic objective to be achieved by many state enterprises. But even those in which we shall introduce public offerings, there's still the need for public direction, because the role of the state has now changed from becoming the director of development and owner of the development process to really being a catalyst for development. And in so doing, we have introduced intention to improve the stock market performance in the country and to build a domestic capital market by having more shares being placed on that market. So there will be more activity. Within the last year or two, the activity levels in the domestic capital market has dropped significantly. And one indicator of economic activity and progress is the level of activity in the domestic capital market. And therefore, the issue of public offerings was not only in terms of sharing of the ownership of this country's wealth, but also in terms of regenerating the markets that will ensure that we can sustain this over time. We did not indicate at this time, and we are not in a position to indicate the details of that program, because we are working on it, and we have already set up technical teams to analyze how we go about this particular initiative of sharing the ownership of this country on a wider basis. I'm hoping that the individual of this country will get an incentive program eventually to support their share in the ownership. So dealing with crime has also been a concern, and we have accelerated a program of support for crime prevention. One, of course, is that we have maintained a high level of expenditure in that area, and obviously that is an important ingredient. But we felt also that the whole crime situation requires a more holistic approach. And that is why we introduced many measures, particularly with respect to mentoring, also with respect to the integration of those elements in the society who have felt left off and have gone into the criminal industry to be re-engaged. So there's a larger social component in our trust to fight crime. There's also a strong enforcement component. And that is why we felt that the police service was indeed a very important ally in fighting crime. We recognize that the entire protective services beyond the police service is important. But at this stage, we have to move step by step. And we have placed focus on the police service by giving them an incentive. An incentive because they do put at risk their own life and limb on a daily basis. They are now called upon to do even more. And to some extent, the human side of the transformation process had not been addressed in the past. And therefore, this is but an attempt to deal with that. An energized police service with a sense of satisfaction, in our view, is one of the important ingredients that we must set into place to deal frontally with the issue of crime, which continues to be a vexing problem for all of us. We feel confident that we will be able, with these new measures, especially with the new measures with respect to the use of bicycles and having police presence throughout this country, and by the use of a genuine program of community policing, that we can make a different dent. All the transformation exercises in the past have been structured within the context of a state-directed solution. What we are now suggesting is a solution that engages the society in finding the outcomes. And that is the fundamental philosophical difference between this budget and previous budgets that have been done in the past. We have also indicated in our program that we are particularly interested in ensuring that the young among us do get more opportunities. Not only have we indicated that the GATE program will be extended now to include vocational training, we have been touched, and I have been touched, in the interactive sessions before, when the young people came to us and said they are happy with the GATE program, but they believe there's too much abuse in it. And they were telling me this. And I said, well, let us streamline the program to ensure that it does not lose focus and become ineffective in the long run. So we said that will be something that we will have to deal with. And finally, in these open remarks, I want to talk about the issue of tax collection. We believe that the tax situation in this country somehow has lost its own focus in terms of two things. There are many arrears that are now on the books that the government has not been able to honor. The figures that were given to me was in the order of $2.8 billion in the value-added tax. There are also arrears with respect to the contractors and other creditors that the government has not been able to honor. We want to get back to the time when a government debt is as good as gold. In a sense, there was such a time. When I was young, not too long ago, that was the story. We want to get back to that situation. But it will take us some time to introduce the new sense of fiscal discipline before we get there. But as I told the Chamber of Commerce when I met them this morning, if indeed we want to honor the commitment that the government debt is as good as gold, then the people must honor their commitment that this is a golden opportunity to pay up the taxes. And it is in that context, therefore, we said, let us have an amnesty from now until next May, and ask the people in this country who have not, for one reason or the other, been able to meet their commitments to the Treasury, that they do so. And an incentive to do so will be to to give them waivers with respect to penalties and interest. That is a very large part of the problem of non-payment. Penalties and interest have grown so high in many taxpayers' default problem that they feel a sense of being taken by having to go and pay all these penalties and interests. So we are saying, okay, the state for this time around will remove that. So we'll get back to your arrears as they stood. A great incentive. And if in fact you are right that those penalties and interests were onerous, now this is a time for you to make it good. I am convinced that that is a measure that can win the support of our country, especially in a climate of a new patriotism and in a climate in which there is going to be a new relationship between a government and its people. And the partnership approach that we have adopted in this exercise is based on the new thinking that government must indeed be a catalyst to development, but government must now engage the people in a direct way to bring about the development of the country. Those are my comments that have tried to explain the underlying factors that informed our specific decisions as to what are the tax measures and what were the fiscal measures. I could just make one final point before I end. There is some concern that there was so much said in the budget and that we have not had the opportunity to increase our revenue. And we have not done so by any form of due taxation. This concern, however, does not stand to the test of credibility. Because when you look carefully at what we have done, we have been able to get more out of the same money than previous governments have been able to get out of much more money. And therefore, that's one reason why we feel a greater sense of confidence. But a fiscal deficit of $7.7 billion, which represents 5.48% of a GDP, is not beyond bounds. We would have liked to keep that to less than 5%. And I do believe that if we get substantial progress in the collection of tax arrears, it will wipe out our deficit altogether. I look forward to that by the people of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Minister.